Hey there, writing buddies. Michael here with another video from Mr. Swaim. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the way that I edit, the way I used to edit, and kind of the difference and why I changed my editing style. One of the first things I ever heard about editing was that Tolkien used to read everything that he had written up to that point whenever he sat down to write. So he would basically edit every day and then start writing. I don't know about y'all, but I ain't got that kind of time, so I don't do that. What I do though is I did take a little bit from that, in that when I do sit down to write, I will read the last couple chapters just to kind of get into the flow of how I was writing before and continue from there. But in doing that, I used to edit those 2 chapters. And that way I would basically, write a couple chapters. I'd go back and reread those and edit those, go a few more chapters, go back and read those last 2 chapters, edit those. And for a while, I thought that was a good process because that got rid of all the, spelling errors. I got rid of any kind of incorrect word choices or autocorrects, whatever, right, that could occur. But in hindsight, that was still very time consumptive. At this point, I don't do that anymore. I just read, even if there's spelling errors, even if there's, red squiggly lines under my words, no matter what, I do not edit those chapters. I just read them just so that way I get back in the mindset and then I continue writing. So how do I edit? First off, you can't edit anything if you haven't written it, right? So the first thing I do want to impress is that when you first start writing, just do not stop. Just write the entire first draft in as, of a concise time as you can, right? If you can get it all out in one sitting, great. Probably not though. But you basically just want to go through as far as you can. Stop writing for the day or for the time period. You got to go eat dinner or whatever, right? But just write all of it out. Get the ideas out of your head and onto the page, okay? So whenever you're writing your first draft, just as few times as possible, just do not stop. Just get it out there.
Yesterday, you said tomorrow. So just do it! Make your dreams come true!
Before we go into what would be kind of considered the second draft and heavier edits, there is kind of a 1.5 edit, and typically what I'll do is I'll read over what I have and I will just cringe and try my best to not fix anything, as far as words, spelling errors, whatever. I'm just going to try to leave that alone. What I'm doing is I'm just making sure that I do not have plot holes, that the arcs are there. And even if they're not pretty right now, that's another thing is you know what? I wish this arc was better. I wish that this line of dialogue was better. We're going to come back to it, okay? Do not think for a moment that this is going to be your one chance to edit. That's a big, big deal. If you remind yourself that you are not done after this, it becomes a little easier. I feel that whenever I'm editing and I think to myself, okay, look, I'm going to go through it right now, but I'm going to be going through it again. So I'm looking for certain mistakes and other mistakes can just kind of wait for now. That being said, the 1.5 draft is really just to tidy up the actual overall narrative, okay? We're making sure that the character arcs are there. We're making sure that the story plot and arc is there. We're making sure that there's no plot holes. Do things make sense? So far, so good? Great. Now we can go on to the true edits. Draft 2 is going to be the heaviest edits that we're going to be doing for the most part, because this is going to actually be taking care of all of those, word choices, misspellings, all of the, thesaurus lookups that we're going to be doing. Hey, I noticed that I'm using this same word over and over again. What's a word that means the same thing? I just got to find, okay, great, here we go. So we're going to be basically updating the manuscript probably the most here with this one. I also will do rewrites or alternate drafts. So if there's a chapter that I don't really feel strongly about. I feel a little off about it. This is the time where I will, because I'm not like, I don't feel married to it, right? So at this point is when I can go, okay, so what if I wrote this chapter again without looking at this chapter, right? And I might pick out a couple lines of dialogue or something like that, right? Just because I'm like, okay, I do really want to have that in it, but I'm going to rewrite the chapter all over again just to see what I might do differently if I were to do it differently, right? This is the time I'm doing that. So this rewrite takes the longest for me because I'm doing rewrites, I'm doing all these edits, I'm still looking for plot holes, I'm still looking for, the character arcs to be there and everything like that. This is going to be the heaviest edit, and I take my time with it as best I can, so that way at the end it comes out as clean as possible. Before we move on to the third draft, read it again.
I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
That's too damn bad!
You're going to be reading this thing a lot. It's going to make you sick. I'll tell you, all of my stories that I've done so far, that especially I've gotten into these deeper drafts, yeah, I've read them a lot, And again, I read the past 2 chapters to kind of get in flow with the book. So every single time I'm reading all these chapters a lot. Okay, that is the unfun part of writing, in my opinion, is having to reread the same story over and over again. But it really makes a difference. So read it again for structure, for narrative purposes. Again, if you're seeing spelling errors, you shouldn't really be seeing a whole lot of spelling errors or word choices. So I wouldn't say hold off on those this time. This time you can probably go ahead and edit those and whatnot. But again, there probably shouldn't be very many. But the main purpose for the reread is to, look for any holes, look for any missing elements, just tighten it up. Also, before we do the actual third draft, we're going to let other people read it. That's kind of scary, I know, but we need other eyes on this. If that's family, friends, that's fine. It's a little bit better to have critique partners. So using websites or critique groups would be really helpful right here. Friends and family are good, but unless they're also writers, of course, that's basically at that point they're going to be critique partners. Friends and family are going to say, oh, it was pretty good, and they're not really going to notice things. You want people who have a critical eye, who are also looking at story structure and plot and all that kind of stuff. They're not looking at it as your work of art. They're looking at it as your work in progress, right? And a lot of times I feel that when family looks at your stuff, they're almost looking at it like a finished product. And they will still kind of edit and be like, oh, maybe you could do this instead. Maybe you could do that instead. That will still be there. But a lot of times, people who are closer to you will kind of think that, they're out of their element anyways. This is not what they normally do. So they're just not going to give you the strongest amount of feedback is all. That's why I say having a critique partner is a bit more helpful in this stage. But once you're done with that, once you've gotten some people to critique it for you, you're ready for round 3. Now, before I go into the third draft, if you have been finding this video helpful at all, please do give it a like down below. It really helps the algorithm. It helps other, writers find it as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you. With the third draft, after having this critical feedback come back, it kind of depends on how it was received, obviously, as far as how many edits you're going to end up doing. But if people are coming back with a lot of structural issues, the plotting doesn't make sense, pacing is kind of all over the place, or plot holes, whatever, right? If there are glaring issues when it comes to structure involved, your third draft is going to take a little bit longer than average, I would say, because really, if you really focused on kind of stepping back from yourself when you did the second revision, and you were trying to look at it as critically as possible, and this is why doing crits for other people is very helpful in this process. But if you were able to take a step back and really look at it as objectively as possible. For the most part, you should probably only have like minor suggestions from your critique partners. Most of the stuff that you do won't be that heavy, but again, if that second draft didn't go so well, and then you give it to people and they have a lot of issues with it, your third draft will end up being a bit heavier. That being said, don't beat yourself up over that, because a lot of times so much stuff will just pass your eye. And again, like I said, I read my stories so much, right? But in doing so, I become blind to things, you know? Oh God, the number of seamed in one of my stories was absolutely abhorrent, okay? That's gonna happen. It is what it is. But having those people come in and show you where your weakest points are, and also where your strongest points are. Hopefully you're getting good critique partners who are not just showing you the bad, but also showing you the good. Knowing what was really working and what wasn't working, during your third draft, you can really implement that. Take that critique, all those critiques that you have, as far as you can, and really overhaul the script. This one, while it might not be as much work as second draft, because again, second draft is going to have a lot of technical errors and stuff that you're going to be fixing, as long as you didn't keep stopping with the first draft, right? The first draft, we just wrote all the way out, okay? We didn't stop at all. We just wrote it all the way out. Second draft, we fixed all that stuff. Third draft, you're going to probably see the most change in your story in the sense of pacing, character development, and maybe even a little bit of the plot too. I have had people tell me like, it would have been nice to have a foreshadowing occur. I've had people say things about, the plotting in certain scenes. Those kind of things can really pile up. If it's one scene here, a couple chapters later, another scene has a plotting issue, another scene has a pacing issue. Those kind of things can kind of stack up and obviously make an unpleasurable reading experience. And I know that I've read other people's work that have done the same for me, where I'm just thinking, man, this is not going anywhere right now, or this is not really making a whole lot of sense, or this is just unclear or whatnot, right? So we all make these mistakes, but having someone come in and kind of point them out, and also point out what's really good, so that way okay, well, this worked. Well, I'm just going to go, when I rewrite my other thing, I'm going to use that kind of mentality, those kind of tricks and tips. I'm going to use that over here to patch this up. All right, we've got our fourth edit coming up. But before we do that, we're going to read it again. We're going to read it every single time, guys.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No!
Now that we've read it again, and again, we might have changed some things. We might have gone through and just, a couple little tweaks here and there. After that third draft, before going into the fourth draft, if we've redone the third draft and we had a lot of problems before, right, then I would probably say just repeat. Like your fourth draft will basically be a repeat step to give it to critique partners first, and then go into your fourth draft. But if you didn't really get that much as far as your critique partners were just kind of saying, hey, here's some word choices, here's some, this wasn't very clear, just update this a little bit here and there. If your third draft really only came down to like some tweaks, really, and it wasn't that big of an overhaul, then I would say that you're going to, instead going back into the critique cycle, you're going to go on to the next step, which is a developmental editor. A developmental editor is someone who is reading your story. They're very much like a critique partner. However, they're probably going to just make changes. They're not going to send you back a manuscript with certain lines through it. They're usually going to actually send you back a manuscript that is just changed. They might, if it's like a Word document, they might like show changes where it's like, okay, if I want to see what they did, I can click on that and really see the difference. But they're going to say, rather than be like, hey, you know what, consider, changing this line to this, or, you don't need this. They're just going to do that. They're just going to be like, no, this is not, you don't want this, you want this. The other big difference between a developmental editor and your critique partners is going to be that the critique partners will oftentimes get your manuscript in chunks. A lot of places that I've seen online, they don't do like the entire story, right? They're just doing chapters or a group of chapters at a time. And so when they're giving you their feedback, they're not able to tell you, hey, you might want to reevaluate this, paragraph or this whole chapter because at the end you're doing this, that, and the other thing. They don't know that yet, right? They're only able to really tell you either what the chapter they're reading is, or if they happen to read your other chapters, they can kind of build on that. And then at the end, I've done this a number of times where I've read people's, manuscripts all the way through. I get to the end and I'd like to tell them, what they might be able to change in the beginning because in the beginning they're asking questions. It's like, well, I don't really know because I don't really know where you're going with this. So I don't really know how to answer that question. But, currently the chapter seems fine, maybe a little pacing issue or whatever. But at the end, I'd like to tell them, hey, this is what you could have fixed in chapter 2, 3, or 4, but it's been like 5 or 6 months. I don't remember that now, right? So I might remember them having an issue or maybe a question. I might not even remember that. So when it comes to critique partners, they are typically going to be critiquing in blocks, while your developmental editor is going to read your entire manuscript probably twice, if not 3 times. Okay? Developmental editors are getting paid, right? So you are probably not going to be getting this service for free. If you are, good on you. But the developmental editor is going to go through it and then go through it again and let you know, okay, this doesn't make sense because of what happens in this chapter down here. This here would be a good place to leave, like to start your breadcrumbing for this twist down here. That is the strength of a developmental editor. Because you're paying them, they're going to be doing the work all at once, and they're going to be doing it a lot more focus-driven than your free beta readers or your free critique partners. All right, now that you got your manuscript back from your developmental editor and you're looking it over, again, we're going to read it, right? We're going to read it all over again. Hooray. A little like before, where if you had a lot of edits coming out of your critique partners, same thing goes with the developmental editor. If you had a lot of structural changes from the developmental editor, then you're probably going to go back through the steps again and go back through critiquing to make sure that it's as strong as it should be. However, if the developmental editor didn't really have that many structural issues, they were just, clean this up here, went over here and just changed a few words there, maybe, changed a couple things as far as earlier chapters maybe, that's fine. But by this point, you should probably have a pretty strong manuscript. Your 5th draft plus is going to be very minor edits. This will also be a good time if you're looking to traditionally publish. This is also a good time to start doing query letters because you should have very strong beginning chapters. And a lot of times query letters, when you query an agent, they're going to ask you for your first chapter or maybe even first 3 chapters, right? So those should be very strong at this point. If you're not looking for traditional publishing, but you're going the self-publishing route, then at that point, I would say you're probably going to be looking at getting a line editor. A line editor is going to make sure that everything is grammatically and punctuationally correct. Everything on that is going to, nothing is going to be pulling the reader's eye away from your story as far as your wording and your punctuation goes. And line editors probably do a lot more than that, but to be honest, I've only had one of my manuscripts professionally edited, and that was most of the work that they did was just punctuation, spelling errors. They did give me a few word choice options as well in certain situations. They did change some words, but for the most part, they weren't going to be doing anything as far as, does the story make sense? They're just looking for, does each sentence make sense, and is each sentence punctuated correctly? And that's it. At this point, you should have a beautifully crafted story that, you would be happy to have on bookshelves. Editing can sometimes be a very grueling process. There are some fun moments in it, though. Making this story that is so alive within ourselves come out onto a page and be alive on the page is it's an extremely rewarding process. And it requires patience and it requires help. We're not going to be able to do this all on our own. Having those critique partners, those beta readers, having that help really pulls the best out of us. And when you're done with it, you can say, you know what? I wrote that. Let me know down in the comments below where you are in your editing process. Do you do anything differently? Let me know. I'd love to hear some other editing techniques. Till next time, happy writing, happy reading.